The NFL doesn't want you to know this, but something is happening behind the scenes that should have every fan paying attention. For decades, Sundays have belonged to football. It was the game you couldn't miss, the league that could do no wrong. But lately, cracks are showing. Viewership is sliding. Ratings aren't what they used to be. The energy that once electrified living rooms across the country feels like it's fading. Sure, the league parades around shiny commercials, recycled rivalries, and polished press conferences as if everything is perfect. But if you ask the people who matter most, the ones buying jerseys, posting highlight reels, and pouring their Sundays into the game, you'll hear a very different story. The spark that made the NFL feel untouchable, it's gone. And the reason why might shock you. Because it's not about rule changes, officiating, or even injuries. It's about a single player. A rookie who should have been the story of the season. A name that carried the weight of hype, swagger, and millions of eyes from college football into the pros. A player who could have injected life into an NFL season that, by all accounts, has felt forgettable. But instead of being unleashed, he's been buried. That rookie is Shedeur Sanders. Think about what that means for a second. The son of primetime Shedeur Sanders, one of the most iconic athletes in American history. The quarterback who turned Colorado into the biggest show in sports last year. The kid who had celebrities, rappers, and influencers lining up to be on the sidelines of his games. The player whose highlights went viral within hours, whose presence alone made ESPN change schedules, and whose name carried weight far beyond football. He wasn't just another college quarterback, he was the cultural moment of the season. And now, he's sitting on Cleveland's bench, silenced before he ever got a chance to light up the NFL. This isn't just about Cleveland protecting a rookie. This is bigger. It's about the NFL itself, and whether it still understands what keeps fans coming back. For decades, the league has been built on stars. Montana's Ice, Favre's Fire, Peyton's Precision, Brady's Dynasty. Every era has had a face that fans rallied around. Every era had a storyline that pulled casual viewers in. That's what the NFL has always known sells. It was never just about touchdowns and tackles. It was about moments, personalities, and the players who turned games into legends. But this year, something is missing. The primetime games feel stale. Rivalries don't hit the same. Stadiums are buzzing less. The momentum is slipping. And while the league tries to pretend otherwise, fans feel it. They're restless. They're bored. They're looking for something fresh, something exciting, something that reminds them why they fell in love with the game in the first place. And the truth is, the answer has been right in front of them all along: Shedeur Sanders. A rookie quarterback with the talent, the charisma, and the cultural pull to reignite everything the NFL is starting to lose. But instead of putting him on the field, the league is keeping him hidden. And if that doesn't change soon, the NFL might be facing a storm it can't ignore. For as long as anyone can remember, the NFL has been the gold standard of American sports. It didn't matter what else was on television, what new social media platform was taking over, or what scandal rocked the headlines when Sunday rolled around. People tuned in. Stadiums were packed, bars overflowed, and living rooms turned into watch parties. The league wasn't just a sport, it was a ritual, a cultural cornerstone. But lately, something feels off. The numbers don't lie. Ratings, once bulletproof, are starting to slip. Networks that used to brag about record-breaking audiences now quietly release viewership totals that look a little smaller each season. Games that should feel like national events, division rivalries, primetime clashes are struggling to capture the same magic. Even the NFL's biggest selling point, the postseason, has shown cracks, with last year's wildcard and divisional matchups pulling in noticeably fewer viewers than expected. At first, the league tried to brush it off. Executives pointed to streaming changes, claiming younger fans were simply watching on different platforms. They hyped up broadcast deals, promising even bigger exposure. They released flashy commercials, filled with slow-motion highlights and celebrity voiceovers, insisting the game had never been stronger. But fans weren't buying it. You can dress up the product all you want, but when the spark is gone, people feel it. And the spark is gone. Look at the atmosphere inside stadiums. Games that once rattled with deafening energy now have quiet stretches where the crowd feels distracted, almost detached. Ticket sales are steady, but the electricity, the goosebumps that used to define kickoff moments isn't the same. Social media, which once exploded with viral NFL clips every Sunday, is eerily quiet compared to the noise around college football or the NBA. Even casual fans, the ones who tuned in for the drama as much as the sport, admit the league feels predictable. Why? Because the NFL has leaned too hard on the same old stories. The same rivalries get recycled year after year. The same veteran quarterbacks dominate the spotlight. The same game of the week feels more like a rerun than a fresh headline. The league has forgotten that fans don't just want football, they want a show. They want characters, new rivalries, and unpredictable twists. Instead, they've been handed a product that feels safe. And safe doesn't sell. Behind closed doors, the NFL knows this. They've seen how culture is shifting. They've seen how younger fans gravitate toward highlights, personalities, and viral moments more than full games. They know attention spans are shorter, competition is fiercer, and if they can't capture excitement instantly, someone else will. Yet instead of adapting, the league has doubled down on the old formula. Protect the veterans, market the same names. Hope tradition alone keeps people watching. But tradition isn't enough anymore. Not when college football can turn a Saturday into a nationwide spectacle. Not when the NBA dominates social media every night. Not when YouTubers and TikTok creators can pull millions of views by telling stories more exciting than the NFL itself. The cracks are there for anyone willing to look. And that's why the decision to bury Shedeur Sanders on Cleveland's bench feels so costly. Because if the NFL is desperate for energy, desperate for a new star, desperate for a cultural spark, why would they silence the one player who brings all of that in a single package? The cracks in the shield are widening. And the league is running out of excuses. To understand why the NFL's decision to sideline Shadur Sanders feels like such a mistake, you have to look at what he did before he ever set foot on a professional field. Because Shadur wasn't just another college quarterback, he was a phenomenon. Last season, every Saturday in Boulder felt less like a football game and more like a Hollywood premiere. Stadiums weren't just filled with fans in school colors, they were packed with celebrities, rappers, and influencers, all orbiting around one player. Lil Wayne, Offset. The rock names that rarely bothered with college sidelines suddenly couldn't stay away. When Shadur stepped onto the field, the cameras didn't just capture football, they captured culture. And that culture spread far beyond the stadium. TikTok lit up with his highlights, pulling in millions of views within hours. Instagram reels of his throws weren't just shared by sports accounts, but by music artists, lifestyle influencers, even people who didn't normally follow football. ESPN bent their schedules just to showcase Colorado games. Overnight, Shedeur Sanders turned college football into the most talked about story in sports. What made it work wasn't just his name or his father's legacy, though both added to the spectacle. It was Shedeur himself. On the field, he had ice in his veins, smooth footwork, calm under pressure, the kind of poise that made fourth quarters feel like his personal stage. He didn't panic when the pocket collapsed. He didn't flinch when defenses blitzed. He stood tall, delivered strikes, and turned pressure into highlights. Fans leaned forward every time he touched the ball because they knew something electric might happen. Off the field, he had something even rarer: presence, the swagger, the confidence, the charisma that drew people in. He wasn't just a quarterback, he was a brand. His social media reach dwarfed most NFL veterans. His fashion choices made headlines. His pregame entrances were shared as much as his touchdowns. Young fans saw themselves in him, while older fans couldn't deny the energy he brought. That's the Sanders effect. It wasn't just about winning games, it was about making football feel alive again. In a sports world dominated by social media moments, Shadur created them effortlessly. While other quarterbacks needed years to build a following, Shadur entered the league with one already in place. A fan base that stretched from college towns to hip-hop stages, from TikTok trends to ESPN's primetime desk. And yet, when the NFL had the perfect chance to ride that wave into the new season, they hesitated. Instead of featuring their newest star, they kept him hidden behind journeymen and veterans. Instead of amplifying the Sanders effect, they smothered it. The result? A season that feels flat, a league that feels stale, and fans asking the obvious question: if the NFL knows stars are what keep people watching, why would they bench the one player who brings everything they're missing? Because with Shadur, every snap is a headline. Without him, the NFL looks like it's playing in the past. For all the momentum Shadur Sanders carried into the NFL, you'd think his debut would have been a league-wide event. A rookie with swagger, hype, and millions of eyes already locked on him? That's the kind of story the NFL usually rushes to the front of the line. But instead of building the season around their newest star, Cleveland did something nobody expected. They buried him. From the moment training camp ended, whispers started. Journeymen, quarterbacks, guys who had bounced from roster to roster without making headlines were suddenly given priority over Shedeur. The front office insisted it was about patience, about letting the rookie develop. They pointed to depth charts, veteran experience, and the so-called right way of easing a young quarterback into the league. But fans weren't buying it. Because patience doesn't sell tickets. Patience doesn't drive ratings. And patience doesn't keep fans glued to a product that's already losing momentum. Instead of capitalizing on Shedeur's star power, Cleveland tried to push another name, Dillon Gabriel. On paper, Gabriel was steady, a safe choice. The kind of quarterback who can run an offense without making headlines. But in practice, he lacked everything Shedeur brought to the table. No swagger, no cultural pull, no highlight reel plays that get shared across TikTok before the game even ends. Gabriel was competent, but competence doesn't make football exciting. And that's the problem. The NFL isn't built on competence, it's built on spectacle. Every dynasty, every era, every ratings spike has been tied to a player who made fans believe they were watching something bigger than the game itself. Shedeur could have been that player from day one. Instead, Cleveland handed the keys to veterans who barely moved the needle. The fallout was obvious. Games that should have been events felt flat. Cleveland's offense sputtered. The storylines were forgettable. And outside of Ohio, nobody cared. On social media, the difference was glaring. Gabriel's highlights barely registered, while old clips of Shedeur at Colorado were still pulling more engagement than anything Cleveland was doing on Sundays. Fans knew it, the media knew it, even the locker room whispered about it. But the franchise dug in. Coaches stood at podiums, recycling cliches about waiting for the right time. Press conferences turned defensive whenever Shedeur's name came up. And as Gabriel threw another checkdown, as Cleveland games blurred into the background of the NFL slate, fans asked the same question. Why hide the one player who could change everything? The truth is, Cleveland's decision went beyond football. It felt stubborn, almost personal, as if the organization would rather cling to safe choices and old ways than embrace the cultural wave Shedeur carried with him. But in doing so, they didn't just bury a rookie quarterback, they buried the spark the NFL desperately needed. And while Cleveland may have thought they were protecting Shedeur, all they really did was put the league's problems under a brighter spotlight. Because the longer he stayed locked away, the emptier the NFL product became. The irony of Cleveland burying Shedeur Sanders is that the proof of his impact was already sitting in plain sight. You didn't need to wait for a regular season debut to see what he could do. All it took was the preseason, those so-called meaningless games most fans barely bother to watch. Preseason football usually slips by without much noise. The stands are half full, the highlights barely make it to SportsCenter, and the ratings hardly move the needle. But the second Shedeur stepped onto the field, all of that changed. Suddenly, clips from exhibition games were exploding on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. A routine throw from Shedeur, a crisp out route, a perfectly timed strike was pulling more views than an entire quarter from other rookies. Fans who had sworn off preseason tuned in just to catch a glimpse of him. And that wasn't hype, it was numbers. Local broadcasts for Cleveland's exhibition games saw noticeable bumps. Engagement on NFL-owned social media pages spiked whenever Shedeur's name appeared. Even national sports outlets, which typically use preseason as filler coverage, found themselves running Shedeur highlights at the top of their shows. For the first time in years, preseason football had buzz. It wasn't just fans watching either. Players around the league noticed. Locker room whispers spread that Shedeur looked sharper than advertised. Calm, collected, and unshaken by the speed of the pro game. Coaches could pretend all they wanted, that he needed time to develop, but anyone with eyes could see he was ready. And yet, instead of leaning into the momentum, the league and Cleveland pulled back. The highlights stopped appearing. The social media clips slowed down. Press conferences brushed off questions with the same vague lines about patience and the process. Just when fans were begging for more, the NFL slammed the brakes. The effect was jarring. One week, fans were flooding timelines with Shedeur's throws. The next week, silence. In his place, Cleveland rolled out journeymen who turned drives into forgettable stat lines. The energy evaporated, and the preseason went back to what it's always been: background noise. Except this time, fans knew what they were missing. They had tasted what Shedeur could bring, and now they were being told to sit and wait. That decision didn't just frustrate Cleveland supporters, it frustrated the entire football world, because the NFL had been handed living proof that Shedeur Sanders wasn't just hype, he was a draw. He turned exhibition snaps into events. He made casual fans care about games that usually slip under the radar. In a league struggling to keep its cultural grip, that kind of pull is priceless. But instead of seizing it, the league acted like it didn't exist. They hid Shedeur behind safe choices, hoping fans would stay patient. What they failed to realize is this: once the audience sees what's possible, you can't go back to ordinary. And the silence after preseason only made the noise louder. Fans wanted Shedeur, and when the NFL refused to give him to them, the backlash was inevitable. When Cleveland tried to bury Shedeur Sanders behind excuses and recycled soundbites, they underestimated one thing: the power of the football community when it decides to speak with one voice. Because what started as whispers inside the locker room quickly grew into a roar that echoed across the entire NFL landscape. Players talk, they see what happens in practice, and behind closed doors, they knew Shedeur was different. Teammates whispered about the way he commanded the huddle, how he stayed calm against blitz packages, how his throws cut through defenses like he'd been in the league for years. But when reporters pressed the coaches, the answers were vague at best. "We're being patient. He's learning. The time will come." The same recycled cliches that fooled no one. And while the team stayed quiet, the outside world wasn't about to do the same. Fans took matters into their own hands. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of them lit up with the same rallying cry, "Put in Shedeur." It didn't matter if you were a Browns fan or not, the message spread like wildfire. Every time Cleveland stalled on offense, old Colorado highlights resurfaced. Every time Dylan Gabriel threw another safe checkdown, Shedeur's viral comebacks from college trended again. It became impossible to watch a Cleveland game without hearing the echoes of the crowd online demanding change. The media smelled blood in the water, and they pounced. Colin Cowherd declared Shedeur was the most underutilized rookie in the NFL. Skip Bayless, never one to hold back, flat out demanded Cleveland make him Cubone. Michael Vick, a legend of highlight reel football himself, praised Shedeur's potential and questioned why anyone would waste it on the bench. Sports talk shows, podcasts, even casual fan streams kept circling back to the same point. The NFL had lightning in a bottle, and Cleveland refused to open the lid. And then came the voice nobody could ignore: Deion "Primetime" Sanders. He didn't rage. He didn't beg. That's not Prime's style. Instead, he dropped one line that cut deeper than any rant could. "You can't keep greatness on the sideline." Coming from a man who built an entire career on redefining stardom in sports, those words carried weight. They weren't just a father's defense of his son, they were a warning shot to the NFL itself. The effect was seismic. Fans doubled down. The chants grew louder, both in stadiums and across social feeds. Media pressure mounted. Every mistake from Cleveland's veterans became ammunition for Shedeur's case, and the narrative spun out of the team's control. This wasn't just about one rookie quarterback anymore. It was about what the NFL represented. Fans weren't just asking for Shedeur, they were demanding proof that the league still knew how to deliver excitement, that it still knew how to recognize stars when they were right in front of them. Cleveland thought they could silence Shedeur with patience. Instead, they sparked a movement. The uprising had begun, and it was bigger than the Browns. What made the Shadur Sanders saga so explosive wasn't just the football. It was the fact that, for millions of fans, this story reached far beyond the gridiron. Shedeur wasn't just another rookie quarterback fighting for reps, he had already become a cultural force. And that made his treatment in Cleveland feel bigger than sports. Shedeur grew up in the spotlight, but not the kind most athletes face. With Deion Sanders as his father, the expectations were sky high before he ever threw a pass. But instead of buckling under the weight, Shedeur leaned into it. He embraced the lights, the pressure, the constant cameras. He didn't just play football, he built a brand, a presence that stretched into music, fashion, and the lifestyle of a new generation of athletes. So when Cleveland kept him buried on the depth chart, it wasn't just a football decision. To his fans, it felt like a deliberate attempt to dim his light. This wasn't about whether a rookie was ready. It was about whether the NFL was ready to accept a new type of star, one who wasn't going to sit quietly, play politics, and wait for his turn. Shedeur represented more than Cleveland's offense. He represented a cultural shift. Think about it. How many rookies can walk into the NFL already commanding sponsorship deals, millions of followers, and the attention of mainstream media outside of sports? Most guys are happy if a local car dealership gives them a free lease. Shedeur was already operating at a level most veterans never reach. That kind of influence makes executives nervous because it's power they can't control. And power, especially in the NFL, rarely goes unchallenged. But here's the twist. The more the league tried to hold him back, the bigger his influence grew. Every clip of him sitting on the bench went viral. Every fan post questioning the coaches turned into another spark for his movement. Even people who weren't football fans started paying attention not because they cared about the Browns' depth chart, but because they recognized the larger story. A young, outspoken, highly marketable athlete was being sidelined, and the public wanted to know why. And that's when it became clear Shadur Sanders wasn't just fighting for playing time. He was fighting to redefine what it meant to be an NFL quarterback in the modern era. Not just a game manager, not just a system guy, but a personality, a movement, a cultural icon who carried influence on and off the field. That's why fans cared so deeply. It wasn't only about wins and losses. It was about what Shadur symbolized. He was the bridge between the old NFL, with its rigid structures and hidden politics, and a new era where players had the spotlight, the platforms, and the voice to control their own narratives. Cleveland thought they were making a football decision. What they actually did was ignite a cultural battle. And once that line was drawn, there was no turning back. By this point, it was clear that Shadur Sanders' story wasn't just another rookie subplot. It had become one of the defining dramas of the NFL season, and like every great drama, the stakes were sky high. This wasn't only about whether Shadur could eventually take over Cleveland's offense. It was about the future of the franchise, the credibility of the coaching staff, and even the NFL's ability to adapt to a new era of talent. For Cleveland, the risks couldn't have been bigger. Stick with Dillon Gabriel or another placeholder veteran, and you risk alienating a fan base that was already restless, hungry, and demanding a spark. Put in Shadur too late, and you lose momentum, wasting the precious rookie years where excitement and upside collide. But start him too soon, and the narrative flips. Critics would line up to call it reckless, to say the team caved under pressure. Every decision carried consequences, and every game made the spotlight burn hotter. For Shadur himself, the stakes were even more personal. The NFL is a brutal league when it comes to reputation. One wrong perception, one bad narrative, and it can stick forever. If he was labeled as unprepared or overhyped, it could haunt him for years, no matter how much talent he actually had. This wasn't just about playing time, it was about protecting his name, his legacy, and the image he'd worked so carefully to build since stepping onto the stage at Colorado. And then there was prime time. Deion Sanders had built his son into more than a football player, he'd built him into a brand. If Cleveland mishandled Shadur, it wouldn't just anger the family, it would ignite the millions of fans who followed them. Imagine being the team that not only wasted Shedeur Sanders, but also put yourself at odds with one of the most influential figures in modern sports. That kind of move doesn't just affect your depth chart, it affects recruiting, free agency, even the way players around the league look at your franchise. But the stakes weren't just local, they stretched across the entire NFL. Because this wasn't just a Shadur Sanders story, it was a test of how the league handles its new era of stars. Athletes today aren't just players, they're influencers, entrepreneurs, and cultural icons before they even take a snap. Ignore that reality, and you risk alienating an entire generation of fans who see themselves in these athletes. Embrace it, and you might unlock the next wave of NFL superstardom. That's why every throw Shadur made, every practice clip that leaked, every headline that dropped carried weight. It wasn't just football, it was a referendum on whether the league was ready to evolve. The stakes had never been higher. For Shadur, it was about proving he belonged. For Cleveland, it was about survival. And for the NFL, it was about showing the world that it could still recognize greatness before it was too late. Long before the drama in Cleveland exploded into headlines, the warning signs were already there. Anyone paying close attention could see the cracks forming, the subtle red flags that hinted Shadur Sanders' journey in the NFL was never going to be simple. The first sign was the resistance. From the moment Shedur's name entered draft conversations, there were whispers in scouting circles that he wasn't NFL ready. Critics questioned his competition level at Colorado, downplayed his stats, and nitpicked everything from his mechanics to his demeanor. But let's be honest, those weren't normal scouting critiques. They felt like excuses, like attempts to chip away at the hype surrounding him. For some reason, Shadur wasn't being evaluated the same way other prospects were. The second sign came after draft night. While fans celebrated, insiders noticed how strangely quiet the Browns organization was about their new quarterback. Usually, when a franchise gets a potential face of the future, they put him front and center. Press conferences, photo ops, hype videos, you name it. But with Shedeur, the energy felt muted, almost restrained, as if the team wanted to downplay the move rather than celebrate it. That silence spoke louder than any words. Then came training camp. Clips leaked of Shedeur making jaw-dropping throws, yet somehow the official narrative painted him as inconsistent. Coaches praised other quarterbacks publicly, but rarely highlighted Shedeur's progress. Fans began to wonder if this was intentional. Was Cleveland trying to slow-roll his rise to protect their veterans? Or was there something deeper, a hidden agenda to keep him from outshining the players already entrenched in the system? And here's the thing. Every time the Browns tried to hold Shedeur back, the internet pushed harder in his favor, but that created its own warning sign. The larger the fan movement grew, the more pressure mounted on the organization. At some point, it stopped being about football and turned into a battle of control. Who gets to decide Shedeur's future? The team? Or the millions of people who saw him as a symbol of change? Another sign was more personal, the toll it took on Shedeur himself. While he presented calm confidence on the outside, insiders whispered that the politics frustrated him. He wasn't used to sitting on the sidelines watching decisions get made behind closed doors. For a quarterback who thrived on proving people wrong, this wasn't just a challenge, it was a test of patience, one that could have long-term effects on his relationship with the league. By the time preseason rolled around, the writing was already on the wall. The cracks weren't just in Cleveland's locker room, they were in the NFL's entire approach to handling a new kind of superstar. The warning signs had been flashing for months. And if the Browns ignored them, they weren't just risking Shedeur's career, they were risking the future of their franchise. Because in football, ignoring the signs doesn't make the problem disappear. It only guarantees the fallout will hit harder when it finally arrives. When you step back and look at the entire saga, Shedeur Sanders' story becomes much bigger than one rookie quarterback fighting for his shot. It's a mirror reflecting the NFL's past, present, and possible future, all colliding in one narrative. For Cleveland, this wasn't just about a roster decision. It was about trust. A fan base that has been burned time and time again wanted hope, and they saw it in Shedeur. By hesitating, by playing politics instead of football, the Browns risked not only losing games, but losing the very people who fill their stadium and fuel their brand. A franchise that once dreamed of rebirth now stands at a crossroads, with the decision about Shedeur looming like a storm cloud that could define them for years. For Shedeur, the fight has never just been on the field. Every step of the way, he's had to deal with doubt, resistance, and narratives designed to limit him. Yet each time, he's answered with work, with resilience, and with performances that force people to pay attention. Whether Cleveland embraces it or not, Shedeur has already shown he belongs. The only question left is how long he'll have to wait before the league finally admits it. For the NFL itself, the stakes may be even greater. The league is at a tipping point where players are no longer just athletes. They're global brands, storytellers. If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.